Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Nick Loper, author of Buy Buttons. Nick, welcome to the show.
Paul, thanks for having me.
Are you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Finish it first and then get an editor. This was a hugely valuable investment to me with my first book, which was back in 2012. I found an editor on Elance at the time, which is now Upwork. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I was like, hey, I'm a decent student in English. I can read my own stuff. Absolutely not. Like, they caught stuff that was just so embarrassing to have missed. And on top of that, they helped with the formatting, because I had no idea, all of the special formatting stuff for Kindle that, so I was like, forced entering page breaks and all this stuff that made it look horrible in Kindle. And so they helped with the formatting stuff. Definitely a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I think the best investment you can make is having a well-edited book.
It really makes a difference. And even they were gentle. Like, they could have probably torn that into shreds had they wanted to. And so I'm always nervous to get that note back, even today, from the editor, because it's like, how much, you want to be done. You want, like, I finished my draft. I want to be done. I want to get this thing out the door. And you're like, well, how much more work is it going to be now to go through these edits? But I guarantee you'll have a better product at the end of it.
Absolutely. Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, getting published is the easy part, right? Like, anybody can do that. The hard part is marketing your book and getting it noticed. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, and that actually transitions perfectly into our next question, and that is to please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
I'll try and not give a one-word answer. Probably the best marketing strategy is having a hungry audience, having an audience that is ready for this product, that's ready for the book. And in my case, that came from years of building a podcast audience, a blog audience, an email list. And so when I was able to send out an email and say, hey, this thing is ready today, and I'd like to invite you to order it at a special discounted launch price, that was by far the most effective way to drive sales. And there was a lot that went into that behind the scenes. A couple things tactically that I think made an impact was, number one, recruiting a launch team. Maybe you've heard it called a street team before, but in my case, this was recruited through the Side Hustle Nation Facebook community, and this was recruited through the email list. I think just once or twice was just like a little PS, hey, I'm looking for a few beta reader, I forget the exact wording, but like, look, I'm looking for people to help me with the launch of this new book, raise your hand if yes, or hit reply if yes. And so had 50 or 75 people in this launch team. They kind of saw behind the scenes as I was finishing the draft, kind of like, my writing process. I shared some early cover mock-ups that I was having done through Design Crowd. I shared, they helped vote on like different subtitle variations as I was trying to work in different keywords and stuff into the title. They saw a sneak preview of the introduction of the book to say, does this resonate with you? Am I on the right track here? Does this make you want to read more? Are you excited for this? And on top of that, they got a copy of the book, digital copy, a week or week and a half before the official launch date. So it gave them a chance to go through there and also to leave their review on Amazon, so that when, it was pushed out to the greater public, it didn't look like, a brand new book with zero reviews. So the number that I'm usually shooting for is at least double digits. So I want to see at least 10 reviews on Amazon before making any serious marketing push just because you kind of need that social proof. The other maybe more fun marketing strategy was there was a conference that I went to right before the launch of this book. And so I knew it was coming out the following week, and I was going to launch it at a 99-cent launch price. So I went to the bank and asked for 50 $100 bills. And so I had these little stickers. So the book was called Buy Buttons, and it's all about, how to tap into these pre-existing marketplaces to make money, like to start your business, like go where the cash is already flowing is basically the thesis of the book, Amazon being one of those marketplaces. So I had all these stickers made for the book. It was a little picture of a button, and it said, buybuttonsbook.com. And so I paperclipped all those to the dollar bills and handed those out to people at the conference as a little conversation starter and say, hey, now you can get the book for free, essentially, since I just gave you $1, which was an intention-getting thing. I was wearing the sticker on my shirt, so everybody could ask about it and see what was going on, and that way they would have those reviews would be verified reviews as well, since they were going to be purchasing the book.
So you had all these dollar bills. How many were there again that you got out of the bank?
$50.
So $50 in $1 bills, and then you basically gave that to them to get the verified review. That is such a unique strategy, especially going to a conference before actually getting the book out there right on the pre-launch portion and going, hey, here you go. And having that sticker on too, that was a great way to brand yourself and to brand your book.
Yeah, and a lot of people were funny. They were like, come on, don't give me $1. Like, I'll just buy your book, It was, but I was happy to give it away. It's just kind of like an attention-getting tactic.
Well, and a couple of things I'll mention too is I've been on your list for years. I had the pleasure to be on your show, The Side Hustle Nation, a few months back, and you've done an amazing job with building your platform and your company. And I know when you able to leverage that type of platform, you can really have an amazing book launch. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
I was really happy with how the launch went. But beyond that, I've been really happy with the staying power of the book. And that's attributed to, I think a couple factors. And authors always ask this, well, how can I drive consistent sales in my book? It's like, well, if you're going to drive consistent sales, you need consistent traffic. And so, driving readers from the blog over to the book. It's mentioned in several different blog posts, so that's one way to do it. I probably should be better about it in the onboarding sequence for new email subscribers, even if it's just in a PS like, hey, I have this book available, or, go check it out on Amazon if you want a whole bunch of different ideas on how to make extra money. Is driving consistent traffic, so that can either be from your own platform, and that's one way to do it, or it can be from Amazon directly. And the most effective way that I found in the last 12 to 18 months of doing that has been AMS, Amazon Marketing Services ads, where, you know this very well, they've added basically a second carousel of books on each book page. It's like readers who bought this also bought this, and it looks identical to that. Readers who bought this also bought this, except it's sponsored products related to this item. So it's a way to get consistent eyeballs to your product from, books and authors. You can target people who are super famous and have much better selling books than I'll ever have. But it's just a way to get visibility from these pages on Amazon that are already getting traffic.
Absolutely. Now, when you launched Buy Buttons, it was it a year ago? Or was it 2 years ago?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So now your audience has increased even more. I think if I remember correctly, your podcast has had was it over 5 million downloads?
Yes. So, and actually, that's probably a good point. And I actually did that once, maybe 9 months after release. Was sent out kind of a relaunch campaign to everybody who joined the list post launch of the book, and say, hey, you may not have heard of this because I probably haven't talked about it as much as I should have, but here's your chance to get it. And so we did kind of a relaunch again at that 99-cent price point to hopefully spike the book in the sales rank charts and just breathe new life into that asset.
Well, I wanted to ask you as well. I know we talked prior to this interview actually being recorded and everything, but you are also you have another book coming out.
I'm working on it. I feel like it's been a while. I'm excited to get back into the self-publishing game. Actually testing out Amazon's KDP print on demand or KDP paperback. I forget exactly what it's called, but since they're shutting down CreateSpace, testing out this new platform for a productivity journal type of product. So I've always done Kindle first, paperback second. So this one is paperback only, I guess, because it's a fill in the blank type of book. So it wouldn't do you much good to have the Kindle version.
So you're launching this one just on paperback?
That's the plan at the moment, and pending some feedback from some beta readers, hope to be able to run with that print on demand setup. So I've got my proof copy, and I thought it turned out pretty good. So we'll see what everybody else thinks.
Well, and from what I've seen, just through a few demos and tutorials that I've witnessed myself, the process is actually, from what it looks like, easier than CreateSpace. Now, I'm going to be learning this the hard way myself in a couple of weeks too when I finish up my podcasting book, because I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to go on there and I'm going to actually see the process. But from what I've seen so far, it actually looks pretty smooth.
It is, and I thought CreateSpace was easier than Kindle too, in a way, just because it's what you see is what you get, and there's, especially if you download their template for the different, margin gutter sizes and all that nonsense. But I just think it's amazing technology to be able to do print runs of one copy, for your book and have it as affordable as it is.
Well, the funny thing too, it's been 2 years since your last book, so I'm sure you've noticed a lot of things have already changed just in those 2 years.
It's been, well, I don't know. I guess maybe I don't have my pulse on it as closely as I should, but I don't know. There's always demand for good products on Amazon, and Amazon, of course, has probably doubled in size in 2 years. Maybe not that much, but it's, there's a significant audience of buyers there. So it's a cool market to tap into.
Well, and you're also choosing the best time of year to launch too. That sweet spot, always in November and December, always the best time of year to launch a book.
All right, I got to hustle and get it out there for, so it's called the Progress Journal, theprogressjournal.net, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I was about to say, if anyone knows hustle, it's you.
Well, that's the idea. Trying to break down a few of the key productivity elements, or at least the most effective ones that I've noticed over the last several years. And as a person who's tried a bunch of different productivity hacks, from taking, at one point I took cold showers for 500 days in a row. I've listened to all this like supposedly brainwave enhancing music and stuff, but it really comes down to just these handful of daily habits that I practice and that have been probably the most effective for me. So that's what the book is kind of centered on. And then, setting people loose to actually make some meaningful progress on their most important work.
So what are a couple of habits that you absolutely swear by that you could share with our audience, Nick?
You bet. So the first is, these short-term sprint goals where, if I'm thinking, okay, what's my goal for the year? Like, that's way too intangible for me. But it's like, okay, what do I want to get done this month? What do I want to get done in the next 4 weeks? What's something realistic? And every time I've done that is when I've actually shipped the thing, instead of, you're like, oh, this is all the stuff I want to get to. I want to have an email list of 100,000 people, or I want to, have $1 million business. It's like too big to kind of grasp. And so, you can do that. And then the answer would be just to, okay, we'll chunk that into shorter term milestones or sprint goals. And then the other thing that has been super effective is just the simple practice of over the course of, probably the half dozen years, but each night itemizing out my top 3 priorities for the next day. So I don't spend the first half hour of the morning guessing or wondering, what should I work on today? Like, no, I know exactly what I should work on because I told myself, written them down the night before, and actually ordered them 1, 2, and 3. And so I kind of forced myself to tackle at least the first one before diving into social media or email or anything reactive. Like, I'm doing at least that one proactive priority before anything else.
Well, that's a great point. Just focusing, instead of 10 to 12 items, focus on 3 things and just attack them at the first opportunity the next day.
Absolutely.
So you ready? Are you ready now for the hard questions?
I thought these were hard already.
I always like to joke around because the fourth question, when we talk about the favorite book, that always seems to be the one that will stump people more than anything. And that is, what is your favorite book? And what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
This one, you're right. This one is tough because it's so hard to come up with just one when there are so many that have had an impact on my life and my business. Um, One that's coming to mind is The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, which is this little parable about really being helpful first and then trusting that the sales will come. It's kind of told from some guy in a sales role. That for me solidified a kind of a shift in mindset. Like I started business like a lot of people do, like for the noble cause of making money for myself. Like, how do I make extra money? How do I make money online? Right. And what I found, over the course of the last decade of doing this stuff is that, money really only follows value. And so this shift was already going on in my head. And I think stumbled into this with my first business. But it's like, okay, be helpful first and then be open to monetization opportunities down the road. Like you can run a charity case for sure. So there's got to be a balance between the two. But that's what I found has worked well, especially with the blog and podcast. Is like putting this great content out into the world. And again, it's 70% somebody else talking. So it's not even my, unique expertise or something else. It's like turning the mic on people like Paul and letting them give value. But, providing a platform and growing that platform has been hugely valuable and has paid me back many, many times over. So that's one that stands out to me from several years ago. And then probably the best book that I read this year, the most impactful book that I read this year, is Building a Story Brand by, is it Dennis Miller?
Donald Miller. Yep.
Donald Miller. The idea that your product, your service, your company is the guide on your customer's journey. Let your customer be the hero and position your service as the guide. That was just a really cool framework to kind of work into your website copy, just how you structure things. Like, so I totally redid my homepage of sidehustlenation.com after reading that, because it just, it's so obvious once you read it, but you're like, oh, we all want to talk about me, but it's like, no, it's about the customer and their journey and how you can help them along the way.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you, especially talking about doing good, helping others. My philosophy has always been about karma. What goes around comes around. You do good, you help other people, it's going to come back. But if you're not there to help other people, if you're in it for yourself, it's going to come back. But it's going to come back in a completely different way and not the way that you want. So I've always had that philosophy about karma. And then you just mentioned one of my favorite books about story branding with Donald Miller, because you're absolutely right. And I changed my approach with that too. We talk about live events where I tell more about my story and my background and how basically my doctor said that I would be dead in 5 years if I didn't get my act together. And that was 7 years ago. So I had all this weight to lose. I lost the weight, kept it off. I was healthy, but I wanted to write this book, and it was 4 years to get this book out there. And then I finally did it, and it just totally changed my life. And now I share that story instead of just talking about helping people with getting published with this service or that service. Where like, hey, this is my own journey. This is how we did it. And it's just, it's just so much more impactful when you do that.
I want to flip this one around. Like, how would you answer either your favorite book or the best book you've read this year?
That's a fair point. So, as what you mentioned, Donna Miller's book as well, I absolutely loved that book because it not only changed some of my philosophies, but also in regards to my business philosophy, where we want to tell more of the story because it's so much more relatable. I'm not a salesy type of guy, so I don't like to do the sales stuff. I like to talk about content, value, working together and helping people. And the way I look at it, that's what helps take care of things. My favorite book, The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. And my favorite quote from that is, it's not how the hand you get, but but it's. Let me make sure I'm saying that correctly. It's about the cards that you are dealt and how you deal with those. So probably not saying that exactly correctly, but it's basically dealing with the hand that you have and how do you respond to that and how do you work with it.
Yeah, it's such a good read. I never actually watched his last lecture, but the book was incredible. Actually, yeah, one of my favorites.
Well, on YouTube, I think it's being watched tens upon tens upon tens upon millions of times, and it's just it's a game changer. So I watched the lecture, bought the book, and it was just incredible. And I mean, he died of pancreatic cancer, and he talked about this is my last lecture. These are my life philosophies, how I want to. How I want things to end, and the stories that I want to share for my family and my friends, and that was just so powerful. It's something that stayed with me for many years now, especially with my own health issues.
All right, good call on that one. I like that one. All right, you win.
Cool. Well, hey, I'm gonna flip it back to you now. So for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Favorite quote is an Edison quote. He says, "We don't know 1/1,000,000th of 1% about anything." And this one just really speaks to me because we're just constantly learning and figuring stuff out as we go, as authors and entrepreneurs, and as humans. I wish I was half as smart now as I was when I was 16. I thought I knew everything, and it's taken a while to knock myself down a few pegs and realize that is far from the case, and really grateful to have a job that lets me learn more every day.
I think the two biggest things that we learn over the years is knowledge, and I say wisdom with that, but also humility. When you're like, wow, I really was that guy back when I was 18 or 19, thinking I knew everything, and then you realize 25 some odd years later, I knew nothing.
Right.
Funny how that works. Well, Nick, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. This has been a lot of fun. It's so great to actually get to interview you. So get to interview the podcast extraordinaire, so to speak. So it's a great time doing that. I do want to ask you, what is the best way for people to find you online?
Well, Paul, thanks for having me. This was a fun one. SideHustleNation.com is the homepage for all things a side hustle. Of course, we'd love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show, available on iTunes and wherever fine podcasts are sold. Would it be helpful to kind of like share the book marketing breakdown, like the Buy Buttons launch breakdown post, if that's something that people are curious in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, we'll link that up in the show notes, Paul. I'll send you the link for that.
Hey, that sounds like a plan. Well, Nick, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.